Your mama sent you?
She said I'm brave enough.
You don't have to be brave alone.
I know.
The desert road that connected Calver's Crossing to the rest of the world was the kind of road that didn't apologize for itself. It stretched flat and pale through miles of cracked earth and sun-bleached scrub. And if you broke down on it at noon in July, you had maybe 2 hours before the heat made serious decisions about your future. Dale Morrow had run his roadside stand at the edge of that road for 11 years. And in all that time, he had seen plenty of strange things crawl out of the desert. But nothing had prepared him for the morning a small green girl walked up to his produce stand, clutched a handwritten note to her chest, and looked at him like she was expecting to be turned away. Dale was sitting in his usual chair outside the shop door, coffee going cold in his hand, watching the horizon do nothing interesting, when he first noticed her coming down the road. She was small, smaller than a child her apparent age should have been, and she moved with the careful, deliberate steps of someone who had been told to be brave and was working very hard at it. Her skin was the deep, living green of new leaves after rain. Her ears came to soft points beneath a tangle of auburn hair that the desert wind was doing its best to destroy. She wore a faded pink dress with a frayed hem and a gray cardigan that was slightly too big for her, the sleeves pushed up the wrists. She was barefoot on the hot pavement, and she was holding a small brown notebook against her chest like it was the most important thing in the world. Dale set his coffee down slowly. She stopped a few feet from the edge of the stand's awning and looked up at him with enormous dark eyes that held a complexity no child's eyes should have held. She didn't speak. Instead, she held out the notebook toward him with both hands, a gesture so formal and careful that it felt almost ceremonial. He took it. His fingers, thick and rough from years of sun and work, felt clumsy against the small, neat cover. He opened it. The handwriting inside was adult, careful, and slightly unsteady, the writing of someone who had composed this message through difficulty. My name is Sarah Voss. I have worked the morning shift at your stand every Thursday and Friday for the past 2 years. I am not well enough to come today, and I do not know when I will be well enough again. My daughter Pip knows the work. She has watched me every shift since we arrived here. She is young, but she is capable, and she will not cause you trouble. I would not send her if I had any other choice. Her wages, if you choose to give them, can go toward our rent. I understand if you say no, but I am asking. Dale read it twice. Then he looked up at the girl, at Pip, who was watching him with an expression of absolute, contained composure that very nearly broke his heart. Your mama wrote this? He said. She nodded once. She's sick. Another nod. Then, carefully, she touched her own chest and made a small, fluttering motion with her fingers, something that might have meant her lungs, or her breathing, or simply something inside that isn't working right. Dale had known Sarah Voss for 2 years. She had shown up one Thursday morning asking about work with the quiet desperation of someone who had already asked everywhere else. She spoke carefully accented English, kept to herself, worked hard, never complained, and had never once mentioned a daughter. He'd paid her fairly, not generously, and told himself that was enough. Now he wondered what that family's Thursday evenings had looked like. He wondered how many times Sarah had come to work sick because there was no one else to come. He looked at Pip again. She hadn't moved. She was still standing exactly where she'd stopped, hands folded now in front of her, waiting. You know how to stack the apple crates? He asked. She nodded. You know how to work the scale? The hanging one, not the digital. It sticks on the left side. She walked past him into the stand without a word, found the hanging scale on the back wall, examined the mechanism for approximately 4 seconds, made a small adjustment to the balance arm, and hung it back in place. Then she turned and looked at him. Dale opened his mouth, closed it, nodded slowly. She worked with a focus that made him feel vaguely ashamed of himself. She res-tacked the apple crates, so the bruised fruit faced inward without being told. She swept the concrete pad along the front of the stand in long, even strokes, working against the wind so the dust went out and not back in. When the first customer pulled up, a rancher named Bill Ochoa, who drove 60 miles every other week for Dale's heirloom tomatoes. She had the tomatoes already weighed and in a paper bag before Bill had finished climbing out of his truck. Bill looked at her, looked at Dale, looked back at her. "New hire," he said. "Temporary," Dale said. Pip handed Bill his bag and held out her palm for the money with a composure that made Bill laugh, a surprised, delighted sound that bounced off the stands to an awning and scattered into the desert. Around mid-morning, when the traffic thinned out, Pip sat down on the step beside the apple crates and opened the notebook to a blank page. She wrote something and held it up for Dale to read. "My mother has worked here for 2 years. Has she been a good worker?" "Yes," Dale said. "One of the best I've had." She wrote again. "She worries she is a burden to you when she misses shifts." Dale felt something move in his chest that he hadn't felt move in a long time. "She's never been a burden," he said. "I should have told her that." Pip looked at him steadily. Then she wrote one more line and held it up. She would have liked to hear it. They worked through the afternoon in a silence that had stopped being awkward sometime around the second customer. Dale found himself watching Pip out of the corner of his eye. The quiet precision of her movements, the way she noticed things before he pointed them out, the way she never asked for help, but also never pretended to know something she didn't. When she encountered the old hand-crank pricing board and couldn't figure out the mechanism, she stood in front of it for a moment, then simply turned and waited until he came to show her. She watched his hands once. That was all she needed. At 4 o'clock, when the light had turned the desert gold and the temperature had dropped from brutal to merely unkind, Dale counted out the day's wages into an envelope. He wrote for Sarah on the front. Then he thought for a moment and added to it from his own pocket, not much, but enough to matter, and sealed it. He held it out to Pip. She took it with both hands, the same careful formality as that morning, and tucked it safely into the cardigan pocket over her heart. Then she looked up at him, and for the first time all day, something in her expression shifted. The composure was still there, but behind it, visible now in the last warm light of the afternoon, was something exhausted and frightened and very, very young. She had been brave all day because her mother needed her to be. Dale crouched down so he was at her eye level, his old knees protesting the whole way. And he said, carefully, "You tell your mama she's not a burden. You tell her that for me. And you tell her to get well, because her job's here when she's ready." Pip looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, turned, and walked back up the desert road toward wherever home was, her auburn hair catching the last of the light, the envelope pressed against her chest. Dale stood there watching until she was gone. Then he sat down in his chair, picked up his long cold coffee, and stared at the horizon for a very long time. Not because it was doing anything interesting, but because he needed a moment to remember who he wanted to be.